what's going on right now between Russia and the United States and the talks. The 28-point plan, then 19 plan, and 22. Nobody knows how many points do they have right now in the document. It seems that they handed over a document to Russian government to study to see
Finally,
what's
yes, yes, yes.
finally exactly after all this chaos. What's so amazing to me that Ryabkov, which I consider him one of the most intelligent, smart officials in Russia, he said that we are not going to play with these dirty games that they're trying to put out there. But how do you see the whole case of Ukraine? Because in my opinion, it doesn't matter what is in that document as long as they're not, you know, aligned with what Russia wants in Ukraine, because Russia
Yeah,
is the winner. Russia is the winner of what's going on in Ukraine. They have to decide what do they want from the war in Ukraine, and how do they see the neutrality of Ukraine in the aftermath of any Ukrainian settlement. What's your understanding? What's your take on what's going on?
yeah, I agree. Sergei Ryabkov, he is kind of the bad cop of the Russian foreign ministry, right? He's considered to be, maybe the number two with the foreign ministry. A lot of people think he is going to follow whenever he's allowed to step down. Um, but Sergei Ryabkov, he's very he's whenever Russia needs to put out a hard line position, needs to punch home their points to their their adversaries, countries they once called their partners, right? It's Ryabkov who does it, and he made clear in the last week that Russia was not making any concessions, that it's already made enough concessions, right? And Trump himself actually said that this week. He was asked by a journalist, what kind of concessions is Russia going to make? And Trump's like, well, the Russian concession is they agreed to stop attacking and taking more Ukrainian territory, and that's it. I mean, that's how much leverage they have over Russia, which is to say, effectively none. In this, in this, at least in this particular situation with Ukraine. Um, yeah, the Russians are kind of, I think they're sitting back at the moment, and they're watching the Trump administration just flail around haplessly, like 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 a chicken running around with its head cut off. Um, there's no, quite obviously, the Trump administration does not have the leverage or control over the regime in Kiev, over the Europeans, or even over the US government that they would need to put through any peace settlement. And I think that last bit needs to be stressed. And Putin actually highlighted this, right? He highlighted that the main problem with the peace negotiations now, he said this in Bishkek in a press conference of a meeting of the Collective Security Treaty Organization. The main problem is the collective West itself, and that there's no agreement amongst them, and of the internal divisions within the United States, right? And right now, I'm counting the people who want this peace process to move forward on whatever terms. On whatever terms. Let's not even talk about whether it's acceptable to Russia yet, but just who want a peace settlement at this point. I'm counting Trump, Vance, and Witkoff. Maybe Driscoll. We don't really know how he personally feels at this point. We know he's very close, politically loyal, and dependent on Vance and Trump. That's it, right? Most of the rest of his administration does not want this, right? Kellogg didn't want it. Now he's stepping down to be replaced by Driscoll. Rubio obviously wants nothing to do with all of this. He's biting his tongue at everything here. And I think he's just being bought off by saying, well, you let us handle Venezuela, and you let us handle Russia, and you can do whatever you want with Venezuela. I think that's actually some kind of some kind of agreement.
Mark, I think we can say that 75% of the administration is neocon.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I don't know exact numbers, but the majority of it, right? And that's not hard, right? I mean, that's not hard to understand, because when we say neocon in the modern context, right, that's bipartisan, right? It's the neocons took over Washington after the 90s, right? I mean, they took over, the way foreign policy and military policy is think of, right? If you remember back in the 90s, there was this project for a new American century, right? That was the head of the the heart of the neocons. Well, there's a new think tank in Washington today, the Center for New American Security, which is the new project for a new American century, except it's bipartisan, right? It represents both a consensus on both sides of the Coke Pepsi divide in the U.S. political theater, in pursuit of U.S.-led Western global hegemony and primacy. There's a consensus on this. Foreign policy differs very little from administration to administration. Usually, Trump is a bit of an aberration in that regard, not only with regards to his, shall we say, rather amateurish foreign policy, but also his kind of instinctual belief in a transactional relationship. And his idea of a transactional relationship is everyone comes to his court and pays him court and throws money at him, right? I mean, that's the way the Arab country, that's the way to get Trump's favor, right? And if not, he blackmails, like some kind of mafia don. If you don't lower your trade barriers, then my cousin Vinny here, he's gonna come and break your leg and burn down your cousin's house. I mean, that's the way he does, except he's threatening tariffs and everything else. But within his administration, I mean, first of all, again, it's key. I think key to point out that there's no coherent foreign policy vision because there's no agreement. And Trump listens to different people present arguments. And I mean, this is openly discussed in the Western media. And it's not a shock to anyone at this point. Whoever he talked to last that convinced him, that's the view he has for the next 15 minutes, right? Until someone else convinces him otherwise. And obviously that sends the foreign policy going one way, going the other way, going the other way. And, and that's not some kind of 5D chess. No one knows what he's doing. They don't know what they're doing, right? And it leads, of course, to, well, it's a bad situation for the U.S., but it's also a bad situation for the world because they have to deal with an erratic and unstable United States, which, it may not be the hegemon, right, that it aspires to be anymore, but it's still first among great powers in many respects, right, particularly power projection around the world. So it makes it very difficult for other countries to deal with the U.S. foreign policy-wise. And I think the Russian government is getting extremely frustrated with this. It's clear that, from what we've heard from Lavrov and Putin over the last few weeks, they're frustrated. They believed they had an understanding with Trump coming out of Alaska. Not a deal, right? There was no deal, but there was an understanding. And they want that understanding to provide the foundation for any diplomatic settlement of the Ukrainian conflict, if such a thing is even possible moving forward. And Trump, coming out of Alaska, just went in the complete opposite direction. He started talking about sending tomahawks, and then put sanctions on Rosneft and Lukoil. Right? When the Russians are like, I thought we talked about this, so that we had an agreement. Yeah, but then I talked to these guys, and they told me something different. And then, well, okay, the things didn't turn out like they said. And now I'm switching back this direction, but I don't actually have the power to move my own people, much less the regime in Kiev, much less the Europeans, much less the mainstream media. I mean, because in the US, I mean, you've got the people within his own administration who don't agree with this. You've got the deep state, right? The blob, as Ben Rhodes called it, the permanent bureaucracy, right? Whatever you want to call it. The security services, the State Department, the Pentagon, even the military-industrial complex, right? This is, the foreign policy consensus in and out of office, and then quite obviously, the majority of both houses of Congress, both political parties, are not behind this. He's only got a fringe minority, and the one that he really, Marjorie Taylor Greene, whatever else I may think of her, which is not much, but she was like the one person like really vocal about this in the House, and he just completely alienated her, and she's resigning or whatever at this point. So both parties in both houses of Congress are against this. And on top of that, the media is against it. And the media, the fourth estate, it's called the fourth estate for a reason, because it is a primary political actor. And it has been an ideological driver, like a whip crack, right, for this entire conflict. Why haven't you sent these weapons? What's wrong with you? Don't you believe in Ukrainian victory? I mean, it has literally been like that. So all of them are against this, on top of, the regime in Kiev, on top of the Europeans. So he just doesn't have the willpower or political capital to force through some type of settlement that, yes, would be favorable to Russia, because the facts on the ground in reality are favorable to Russia at this point. And Putin made clear, we don't need this. We are meeting the goals of the special military operation on the ground, right? And we will meet them militarily, right? It may take a little longer. It may cost us, but we are doing it, and we will finish it. We will see it through. And we have no doubt about that. In fact, because then we don't have to there's not any pressure on us to make any messy compromises, right? We get to dictate terms. We may actually prefer that solution at this point. But, we're not uncivilized, unreasonable people. If we can meet our goals, or at least some interpretation of them, right, diplomatically, we're willing to do that. We know the rest of the BRICS, the BRICS big, right, China, India, Brazil, South Africa, they all are in favor of a diplomatic option if such a thing is possible. So, we try to present ourselves as being, the adults in the room, the elder statesmen, right, that are, at a different level, not playing these dirty games, as Ryabkov put it. Russia's is extremely frustrated. One of the things on top of not following through, changing its mind, again, Trump is largely responsible for this inconsistency, this instability. But also the U.S. government, as far as Russia is concerned, it's increasingly come to understand that the U.S. is diplomacy incapable, right? Again, part of because the Trump administration, doesn't have control over the U.S. government to a very significant degree, U.S. foreign policy. But also the way that the Russians are used to doing business, right, diplomatically with the United States, with other great powers, is a very serious, formalized, exacting process, right? You build up diplomatic teams, they consult, they come up with draft documents, these are played back, right? And then maybe there's some back channels, and then there's some revision, right? It's a very exacting, formalized process. And Putin highlighted again this weekend, it's not just this is the way I want to do it. This is the way it has always been done, and it is the only way to do it, right? Because we can't have a handshake, a wink, and a nod in a smoke back of a smoke-filled room, right? On an informal meeting, and that's not acceptable for the level of politics of great powers, right? We first of all don't trust you any further than, well, I don't want to say any further than Putin could throw, because Putin probably, judo flip could probably throw him a bit, more further than I could anyway. But they just can't rely on the U.S. or the West, right? So they would require an even higher level of formality and some type of international legal mechanism that would bind the West to what they agree to, as personified with the U.S. at least, because I frankly I can't see it. I mean, the U.S. pulls out of, I don't know, the short and intermediate, the anti-ballistic missile treaty, the short and intermediate range nuclear forces treaty, the open skies treaty. They don't want to renew New START. They pulled out of the JCPOA. They were laughing up behind their hands all the time at Minsk. That was enshrined in a UN Security Council resolution and international law. You see what's happening with ceasefires brokered by the U.S. With Israel, as Israel is bombing Gaza every single day. I mean, there's nothing to trust. There's no ability of trust, and again, for serious diplomacy, right? The level of professionalism and exacting detail and work, the Trump administration lacks the patience. It lacks the attention to detail, and lacks the professional capacity to conduct diplomacy at that level, and that's a real problem. And it's not just a problem for Russia; it's a problem for the rest of the world too. I mean, China's got to be. Right now, there's an informal agreement to put the trade war between the U.S. and China on pause, right? To take a step back, but it is quite definitively not a final settlement, and China's got to engage with this, at the U.S. as well at some point, and I'm sure this whole process isn't giving them a warm fuzzy about conducting serious negotiations with the U.S. either.